Hey, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Considering the Source. So, I'm sitting down today with a good longtime friend of mine, Adam. And we sat down for a few hours to actually talk. And, you know, I've known Adam for almost 20 years. And there were things that we talked about during this session that I had never heard about before. There were times that he got emotional and I got emotional. And it was just a really good conversation. And I'm going to say this right now. I think this podcast is really a great representation of what I want this podcast to be about. To hear stories from people that you had no idea the things that they experienced. Because I think that it's when you hear those stories, that's when you can really start to see that everybody has been through something. And in light of that, we need to be a little bit more gracious to one another. So without any further ado, I'm going to present to you my interview with my good friend, Adam Gloege. So I'm here with Adam, and we're at the library in a tiny little room, and so we're going to go ahead and hear a little bit about your story, Adam. So don't be nervous about this. I mean, there's only like 7 people listening.
Right. Yeah. No, your audience will grow though, and you know this will be in the history.
You're very optimistic. Maybe too optimistic. So now, Adam, I've known Adam since probably, I'm thinking easily the mid 90s, because I was married.
Probably before we had Sam, I would imagine that was late 90s.
Yeah. When was she born?
98.
Okay. So I remember when you guys were pregnant and you told us. So yeah, we're talking probably 97, 98, something like that is when we first met. And so, this is the truth, what I'm going to say right now. You're one of those people in my life that if I had to say, name 5 people who have definitely affected and affected the way my life went and moved it from here to here, you're definitely one of those people. And if somebody says, all right, Scott, name your 5 closest friends on this earth, you're in that 5.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, you're probably in the top 3 because
It's really meaningful.
Thank you. You're such a liar.
Come on, I'm serious.
No, because, and we'll talk about that a little bit today, about where our stories kind of cross paths and a little bit about that. But you, Adam, have a very interesting, at least in my opinion, a very interesting start to your story. So, where did it all start? Where were you born? Where were you raised? Tell me about that.
Sure. Well, it was a dark and stormy night.
Yes.
Late 1975. No, I was actually born in Parma, in 75.
Okay.
Parma Hospital. And, we very early on, I think I was 1, maybe 2, we moved out to southern Ohio and lived on a farm in Guernsey. And I think I lived there for maybe a year or 2. My mom was a little bit of a nomad. So she and my dad were married at that point, but they were not really close. There was a I'm going off to war, and if I get killed in Vietnam, somebody should get the death benefit. Do you want to marry me before we leave? That was kind of the story of my mom and dad's get together. They were just friends from high school. Really? Yeah.
And your sister, she's how much older is she?
About 3.5 years older than I am.
Okay.
So they got married just being friends before he left for Vietnam, and then he wasn't over there very long before it ended, and came back, and while they're married, they might as well stay together or whatever. So they ended up. That was the basis of the strength of their relationship. But
so, wow, the reality was that it was the possibility of death was so real.
Oh yeah.
That, all right, somebody should probably gain from this.
Right. And I'd love to say my dad was like a Green Beret and he was over there, Special Forces. He was a photographer. So he had a lot of pictures of trees and little Vietnamese kids and stuff like that. But he took pictures for the paper. And
what paper?
I don't know, what Stars and Stripes or whatever they are.
Oh, okay.
Like that. So,
And how long was he there?
I don't honestly know. I don't know a lot of my dad's story, but probably less than a year. Like, I don't think he was over there very long. He was a conscientious objector, so they didn't put him on front line unarmed. So he did some medic training. I don't even think he went into the field. I think his medic training essentially came into place on base. He took pictures and patched people up. And
why was he a conscientious objector?
So he actually grew up Adventist and felt that that it was wrong to bear arms. He was a bit of a pacifist. And so he went in saying, well, I can't shoot anybody. And, my religion won't let me kill anybody. So he said he was a conscientious objector. Well, part of me feels like he knew that would keep him a little bit distant from the front line, too. So,
what makes you think that?
Just because he was not an overly religious guy at all. Like,
so it's convenient.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. He died when I was 7. So what I know of him is filtered through a 7-year-old's mind. It's not. I don't know a lot of his story, but
was your mom, or has your mom been able to fill in any of the blanks or give you any insight?
So, no, not really. And I don't know how much of it is she just doesn't really know him all that well, or, because they divorced when I was 4. So, so I don't think they were together all that long. 4 or 5 years. Well, actually a little longer because my sister's 3 years older. So I guess they were together 7 or 8 years probably. But my mom doesn't talk about anything. Growing up, I'd ask her about her past, my past, and she
closes down?
She just gives a lot of blow off, like, oh, well, just not much to tell, that sort of thing. But, I mean, the reality is she had a very, very rough childhood. So, and that's her story to tell, but she really doesn't talk about it.
Was she raised Adventist too?
She was not. No. She actually was raised without religion. I think they were Catholic, but they, didn't even go on Christmas and Easter. So
at some point in time, though, she converted to Adventism for your dad?
So no. This is kind of the interesting story. So they were married, and at some point, my sister and I come along, and she has a conversation that says, we have kids now. Maybe we ought to start thinking about going to church. And my dad says, oh, well, whatever. If you want to take the kids to church, go ahead. So there was a flyer in the mail for a Daniel and Revelation seminar at the local church. And,
no, really?
Oh, yeah.
That's so unheard of.
Yeah, crazy, right? Daniel and Revelation as a means of recruiting. So she goes, and she comes home, she tells my dad, she's like, this is really interesting stuff. I went to this local church, and they're talking about prophecy and dragons and bears, and this is just nuts. And my dad is like, is that an Adventist church? She's like, well, yeah, how'd you know? He's like, I'm an Adventist. And so she'd been going for 3-4 weeks at this point, to this few times a week seminar or whatever. So, long story short, she was like, are you kidding me? So they ended up getting to go into church for a little while together.
And that was where?
In New Mexico. Yeah, because we moved, again, when I was 3 or 4, we moved from Guernsey, from the southern area of Ohio, down to New Mexico, because my dad's parents and brothers lived there. So the Gloege side was in New Mexico.
Okay. All right.
They were only here because they went to Mount Vernon Academy.
Who did?
My dad. And his brothers. They lived here for a little while, but then they relocated to New Mexico for work, and my dad came back because of his ties to Mount Vernon.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Which, I don't know if you heard, but it's closing down.
Is it really?
Yeah. This year is the end.
You're kidding.
No.
Not profitable?
Oh, yeah. Way not profitable. All right. So let's go back to New Mexico.
Yeah.
All right. So the family moved to New Mexico to be with your dad's family.
Yes.
All right. And go ahead.
So they are, my dad's family is German. They are so my dad was first generation American. He came over, they escaped Germany like while the wall was being built, the Berlin, through Berlin.
Did they kill Jews?
They did not. Although my grandfather, I don't know. He might have. He was in the army and he marched under Hitler.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know that he was like, I don't think he was a death camp guard or anything like that.
But you can't be sure.
He would not. Truthfully, you can't be sure. He would not talk about his experience in the army. He would not say a word.
Is that right?
Yeah. And his was, it wasn't I just don't recall. It was a very firm, very decided, we are not going to talk about that. At all, period.
Oh, wow.
So maybe.
You're part Nazi.
Yeah. Got a half a swastika, apparently.
Wow, this is going to be great for podcasting. My interview with a Nazi.
Yeah.
All right, so they're German. They moved. Okay.
So they, as the wall was being built, they escaped. I don't remember the details, but I remember my grandmother telling me it's quite a harrowing story. I mean, they were being chased by guards. It was the real deal. It was like the movie kind of story. They somehow escape. I don't know if they jump on a plane or a train or somehow they get out of the country and immigrate to Ohio. Somebody sponsored them to come over here, and my grandfather found work in Cleveland, and then ultimately they moved out to New Mexico. And
what's leading everybody to New Mexico?
Work again.
Oh, okay.
So in those days, we lived outside of Albuquerque in a town called Rio Rancho, which today is, a large suburban area outside of Albuquerque. In those days, it was the middle of the desert. There was literally nothing there. Rio Rancho was just being formed, as I understand it. And so he found a job as a tool and die maker, and one of his buddies bought a business out there in Albuquerque, and asked him to come and help.
Okay.
So he did, and that's how they moved out there.
Okay. So you guys move out there, and you live where?
So when we first get out there, my dad was not a planner. My dad was a lot of fun, but not at all responsible. Like literally, he had a great time in life. So he was always a cut first, measure later kind of guy. Okay. So his folks moved out there, and he said, oh yeah, I'll move too. So he bought a piece of land. And was going to build this great house. Except for he didn't have any money at all. So once he bought the land, he had literally no money. I think he had like $100 to his name, kind of a thing. So he figured, we'll just figure it out. I'll get a job when I get down there. So he got down there. He had a hard time finding work. He finally did find some work. I don't know what he did. He was an electrician. He worked for some company down there doing that. And he needed a place to live, and he didn't want to live with his mom and dad. So he found, wasn't on the internet because it didn't exist. I don't know where he found it, but there was an old school bus that he found, and he thought, this is awesome. This thing is going to be a twofer, because I have a car and a house all in the same thing.
Yeah.
So
he was very progressive.
He really was. So he bought this school bus. And he would drive it around and he'd park it on the land, and that's where we lived. We lived in the school bus. He'd taken out all the benches, and he bolted a hammock to a few hammocks to the ceiling, and we slept in the hammock, and we had like a big feeding trough that we would fill up from the well on the property, and that's where we took our bath, is in this feeding trough, and we lived in a bus.
And you're how old at this point in time?
4 or 5.
Okay, so you're an idiot. You don't know.
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, you thought this was the best. Do you think your dad? This is.
Oh yeah, I thought it was awesome.
You're the luckiest boy in the whole world.
Yeah, as far as I was concerned, I had it over every kid in the area. Like, they live in a house.
Did you ever have friends over?
No. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere. There's mountains outside the Sandia Mountains, and we live up in the mountains on this little desert plot of land in a school bus. There is no neighborhood.
Is the bus like partitioned off? Like, this is the living room, this is the kitchen?
No, it is just all the seats are out. And, except for a couple that we had, like a card table that we would eat at, and those were the seats around. It was like the bench. They'd turn them around. I don't know if you bolted to the floor or what, but, Then we had hammocks for sleeping in.
All right. Now, my knowledge, the depth and breadth of it about New Mexico is entirely from the show Breaking Bad.
Okay.
All right. So I know that the two things I know is that currently meth is a big thing there apparently.
Yeah.
And the second thing is like whenever they're out in the desert, they're always wearing coats because I'm understanding that it actually gets pretty cold out there.
It does.
All right. So
it snowed. We were in the mountains, and in wintertime there was snow.
So what are you guys doing for heat in there?
And this is where the story's a little fuzzy. I don't know that we were in the bus forever. Somehow my dad scrounged up the money to buy a used mobile home, like a single wide trailer. So I don't know that we spent the winter there. I think it was probably just, a couple of seasons.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it got cold.
Oh my goodness.
It got cold.
And so you would use the restroom outside. You would just go anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was,
And so you're around 4 at this time, which means that your sister is 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Okay. And so is she in school at this time?
Yes, we both were.
And were you going to like a regular public school?
It's fuzzy. So over my childhood, I went to 13 different schools.
This is why we're friends.
Yeah.
Right here.
So again, my mom was really nomadic. We didn't stay in one place for very long, and there was always a lot of changes in our life. And so there were times where we went to public schools.
Okay.
But not very often. My mom was a big believer in Christian education. She always loved God and believed in God, and even when she wasn't really a practicing Christian, she wanted us to be raised with a knowledge of God. So she made the sacrifices to put us through private school, and it was a real sacrifice. I remember when we lived in New Mexico, we pretty much never saw my mom. She worked 3 jobs. So my sister and I raised each other. She worked that hard to be able to, this is after my mom and dad had divorced, and she worked her ass off to be able to put us in private school. And
wow.
Those were the years where she literally slept on average 3 hours a night, and 3 to 5. And that was kind of it.
Yeah, like right now, I'm thinking because I know your mom is still an Adventist.
Yeah,
and will probably, unless she has like an Apostle Paul moment where God comes out and blinds her, she will never leave. But I'm thinking to myself, how do you're in your life with your children make that type of a sacrifice that you're that bought in? How do you walk away from that? Meaning, like, when I've sacrificed this much for something, I cannot just walk away from that.
Yeah.
It's going to take...
Well, she wasn't Adventist at that time.
So she was just sending you to Christian schools.
Oh, yeah. These weren't even Adventist schools.
And she wasn't Adventist then?
No. So when we moved to New Mexico, my mom...
We're going to edit that whole part. All right.
when we moved to New Mexico, my mom wasn't an Adventist. So she was just working hard. She believed in, it wasn't just for our education. Once they got divorced, I don't know the details of child, of whether he paid child support or didn't or whatever, but, I know they shared custody. I bounced back and forth between his house and her house and my grandmother's house and, his girlfriend's house and his wife's house, while he was married to his wife, his girlfriend and his wife's house. And
your dad was a player.
Oh, he was a player, man. My dad was old school. He was very German in his mentality, and the role of women was he needed somebody to wash his clothes and to, keep him warm at night and to make his food. And
your dad is a genius,
there was not a whole lot of like the whole, it's a big love story romance. Nah, that wasn't my dad. And this is a guy who said, I'm going to war. Somebody should get the death benefit. We should get married. This is about the level of his romanticism.
Yeah, there's no real emotion there at all.
No. So after they got divorced, he ends up going to an Adventist place because he knows he needs to find a woman. So he figures he'll get an Adventist this time. So he goes to an Adventist. I don't know if it was like a sanitarium or a health place. This place called UG Pines. I don't know much about it out there, but it's an ultra conservative,
Yeah.
compound.
Facility of some sort.
So he goes there, somehow, over the course of a weekend, comes back married. So he meets this lady.
That's strange. That makes perfect sense.
Right. He meets this lady, and it turns out, and maybe, again, maybe it was longer than a weekend. It could have been 2 weekends,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure.
Give him some credit.
Right. It wasn't that long. But he
didn't rush into anything.
No. So he marries this woman. He comes home, and she is a total raving psychopath. Literally not kidding. This woman...
Give me an example.
Oh, there's so many. So this woman is, seriously chemically imbalanced. She's bipolar. I would almost certainly say she was. Her anger was epic, but she was super controlling. So, for example, at dinner time, she would watch my sister and I and chastise us if we didn't chew the correct numbers of times every bite. So she would watch and count our chewing and make sure that we chewed at least 30 times every bite.
Ugh.
Really not kidding.
That sounds like a definition of a hell.
Oh, it was so bad. She had 2 kids who were demon children and hated us and couldn't understand why, some new guy was living with his mom and his kids were around. So they
tortured you?
Oh, bad. He would shoot me all the time with his BB gun and, tie me up to a tree and then leave me out there. And this was a pretty crazy kid. He's probably in prison at this point.
But I bet he chews his food 30 times each time.
No doubt. So, at least he has good, good eating practices.
Oh my gosh. And, okay. All right. Then listen, if there's anyone out there judging Adam's father for having a girlfriend after being married to this woman, all right, so he had a girlfriend too.
Yeah, he was in the process. Clearly he realized, it didn't take him long to realize that this is not a great situation. So he tells her that he wants to get a divorce, at which point she proceeds to try to kill him. So...
By what means?
Fire poker. So she grabs a fire poker and I remember her chasing him around the house with...
You were there?
Oh yeah. We were hiding underneath the table. So she's chasing him around the house, swinging this fire poker,
And this isn't like a comedic moment.
Oh, no. This was the first of the times that she tried to take him out. So he left and obviously...
Did he take you with him?
He did. So he left, he took us with him. He took us to his mom's house.
Okay.
And it was shared custody. So, we spent 50% of the time with my mom, which was really kind of 50% of the time just hanging out, by ourselves because she was always at work.
Okay.
And 50% of the time with him, which was at this point at his mom's house. Because he, being my dad and all, he found a woman somewhere who was truly an amazing woman. This woman was phenomenal.
Really?
I wish that my dad had lived, because I would suspect that they would be happily ever after. She was fantastic. So when he was living with her, we lived part-time with, we lived with her when we were spending time with him.
Okay. What else did the crazy woman do?
So I remember one time the car wasn't working, so he had broken his leg. So he's standing on one leg, the other one's in a cast, kind of sticking off to the side, and he's had his head underneath the car trying to fix it. And I remember her sneaking up behind him and pulling out the support thing and just repeatedly slamming the hood on his head to try to take him out that way.
She was trying to kill him with the hood.
Yeah.
And you're watching this.
Yeah. Yeah, she was nutbag.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, needless to say, unfortunately, it was right in the midst of this. He had filed for a divorce, and he was, they were going to be divorced. That he ultimately died. He had broken his leg in a motorcycle accident, and the doctor set the bone wrong. So it formed a blood clot over like a bone chip, and I think it ultimately went to his heart or his brain or something like that, and he ultimately died. So
was this a slow or was it a quick death?
It was slow. Not like really, really slow, but over the course, he'd set his leg, and this is back in the day when doctors were, I don't know, there was no patient empowerment back then. Mm-hmm. Doctors were kind of god-like status, so. He went back to the doctor and said, "Doc, I'm in agonizing pain, and it's slowly moving up my leg. I don't know what the problem is." And the doc said, he looked at him and said, oh, I think you're fine. Come see me tomorrow if it's still bad. So he came back, it's the worst, I'm in this terrible pain. And the doc looked at him and examined him again and said, you're fine. And literally told him, what you need to do is just, you broke your leg, man. Go home and take pain like a man. So my dad went home, and the next day he died. Because I guess the pain was the bone chip moving through his system.
Were you there when this all happened?
I was. It was Father's Day, actually. And we were at his girlfriend's house, and we were preparing to go over to his parents' house for dinner for Father's Day. Mm-hmm. And it was time to go, so we walked out, and it's the middle of summer in the desert, so it's 195 degrees outside. And I guess they said that, well, at least they thought initially that it was the shock, because he got outside, got halfway through the parking lot, and just dropped right in front of me. And so I'm looking at him, I'm like, screaming, Dad, what's going on? Are you okay? And he wasn't okay. He wasn't moving. He was just laying there. So his girlfriend ran me and my sister over to the neighbor's apartment and said, hey, we need to figure this out with Jurgen. You need to take Adam and Erica. And so
Jurgen is your dad?
That's my dad, yeah. So I remember being terrified, because I didn't even know these people. Apparently they were friends of his girlfriends. So I remember running into their house and running behind their couch. And these are those strange moments in life where you have just an incredibly vivid image in your mind, just burned into your mind of what it was like. Mm-hmm. So I remember sitting behind their couch, and it's the late 70s, early 80s, so it's this shag, avocado green carpet. Mm-hmm. There's a yellow Lego and a broken red crayon. I'm hiding out behind this couch and just crying. Mm-hmm. So eventually, that's all I remember about that piece. But that was the last time I ever saw my dad, was laying in the parking lot. They took him, and they thought it would be too traumatic for my sister and I to see him. So dead. So they had him cremated, and that was it.
So I've known you since the 90s, and that you've never told me that. I've never heard any of that.
Yeah. It made Father's Day fun for a long time.
And it still happens. It still comes up on Father's Day, yeah?
It does not, actually. God has an amazing way of restoring. And when I had my kids, the restoration came. Father's Day took on a whole new meaning for me. Mm-hmm.
But prior to that,
it was hell. It was worst day.
What does your sister remember?
Much more, unfortunately. I was young enough that for me, a lot of this is gone, gone to the past. Just you're too young. I don't have a lot of memory of a lot of my dad or that time. But she was, if I was 7, 8, she was 10 or 11. Mm-hmm. So for her, I think she remembers more. The difficult part was we had a life down there, as crazy as it was. We had a life down there where, our grandparents loved us. My dad's girlfriend loved us. My mom's boyfriend at the time that she was living with, we were very close to him. We had a lot of support to go through the difficult time, but
it sounds stable in some way.
It was, actually. As unstable as our life was, there was elements of stability throughout it. Maybe it was stable is the wrong word, but there was a lot of good in it, so many good memories with my grandmother. She was just a wonderful lady, and of course, I was her favorite human being on the planet, so she must have been great. But it was at that time that my mom, right after my dad died, it was at that time that my mom said, now would be the best time to move back to Ohio. Because her viewpoint was she had started to really feel the pull back towards becoming a Christian at that point. practicing her faith. And the guy that she was engaged to, living with, was an atheist. And she just didn't want to marry a guy who was an atheist. So it was while all this was happening with my dad, I mean, separately, obviously, this had no connection to it, that she was going through this period of adjustment in her life. And my dad's family hated her. I mean, they, blamed her for the divorce. They blamed her for everything, So she didn't have a support system there, and her family's all back here, and she's now breaking up with this guy. So, it was at that point, I would tell you probably within a week or two after my dad died that we moved back to Ohio.
Wow.
And I remember telling her, I mean, this is, even as a little kid, I literally remember saying, but, in whatever little kid way, everything I know is here. My grandmother's here, my grandfather's here, Pat's here, all these people, that was my dad's girlfriend, all these people are here. It's, this is home. Why are we leaving? And, she basically said, oh, don't worry, Cleveland's phenomenal. You're going to love it. My family's great. You'll have a new family up here in Ohio or whatever. So, which ultimately none of that was really true. Her family is just a bunch of nut jobs. And we never had any relationship with them at all. Never a positive one, at least. But she needed to get away, and I don't think she knew that. She'd been away since she was 19, probably.
Yeah. You mentioned Pat.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in touch with her again?
So it's interesting. I found out years later that Pat had tried to remain in touch with us, and had sent us letter after letter after letter, and my mom, when she made a break, she thought it was best to just make the break. So she threw them all away. So I think Pat wanted to remain in our lives, but I've never, she has a pretty common last name, so I've never been able to, and I don't even remember what she looks like. I tried once or twice to track her down on Facebook, or something like that.
Really?
And just to see, but, there's just too many people with that name. So, and any one of them could have been her. And
right.
The years have changed her enough that I wouldn't recognize her. So.
I would imagine that would be a really good reunion.
It would. There are certain people that made an impact and maybe don't even realize how big of an impact.
Right.
And she was a person like that. The reality is, I don't know how long she was in our life. It could have been, it wasn't years. It could have been months,
Yeah.
But she was awesome.
But in those, yeah.
And she made an impact in those.
She was there at an incredibly powerful moment of your life.
She was. So, yeah, so that was the New Mexico era.
It was at this point in our interview that I actually ended up pausing the mic, and I was just talking to Adam for a moment off mic, because I told him that I had never seen him get emotional. As he was telling this story, there were more than a few tears that were just kind of running down his cheeks, and I had never seen that before. Not to mention, I had never heard some of this story before. Adam and I had never talked this in detail about those last minutes of his father's life and what he saw. So I wanted to take at least a moment and give him some time that he could maybe gather himself, or maybe it was so I can compose myself, because it was a really, really powerful moment. So after that, we then went ahead and began to talk a little bit, but I did want to let you know that there was a little bit of a break, and now we'll get back into the continuation of that. Good.
I think that you had mentioned that you haven't seen me get emotional much.
Yeah. And
people can go through rough experiences in life and internalize it and get angry, and I had my period where that was the case. But for me, I try hard not to get real emotional about it. For me, I've just moved to just trying to process things logically and look for the positive. So while I could tell crazy story about how my life was. If I'm honest about it, and I look back on my life, I feel like it's incredibly blessed. I mean, I feel like it's awesome. Like, I have not hated my life by any stretch of the imagination. There's never been the time where I'm like, oh, you know, why does my life suck so bad? Because even as a kid, my MO is like, you know, figure out a way to still enjoy the day or still enjoy, you know, like make it okay.
Yeah.
So I tend to compartmentalize the emotion and deal with it separately from the event.
Did you still have contact with your grandfather and the Gloeges?
Not a lot. So my dad had 3 brothers, only one of whom is alive currently. They've, you know, gotten sick, died from various things, but actually 2. 2 are still alive. And one of them's pretty sick.
He is currently pretty sick.
Probably won't make it very long. But the one uncle was an uncle I was very close to. He lived in Colorado. And I would spend summers out there, where, you know, a month or so over the summer, because I have cousins roughly my age out in Colorado. So I would go out there and we would hang out. And they were very, very close. And my other uncles I wasn't close to at all, even though they lived in the same town. And he lived in Colorado when I lived in New Mexico. I was close to them and never spoke to the other ones. So they were at that point were just very involved in drugs and their lifestyle, and you know, they didn't have a lot of interaction with anybody. You know, obviously they cleaned their life up eventually, but that was the era where they were kind of big hippies. You know, so. So when we moved back to Ohio, my mom, after she joined Adventism, some crazy stories there, but after she joined Adventism, she kind of cut ties with them too. And she just did not believe that it was a good idea for me to have, and my sister to have any interaction with anybody outside of the church, really. And they fell into that. And I don't know if it was religious. I don't know if she just was bitter about the Gloege side of the family and didn't, you know, about my dad's side of the family and didn't want to have interaction with them. I don't know what the story was, but she and my uncle, I mean, she knew him before she knew my dad. They were friends from you know, the neighborhood or whatever. And the neighborhood was here? Was Cleveland? So they both grew up in the near west side of Cleveland. That was before they moved to New Mexico. This is where they were living.
Huh. So you moved. So your mom, a week or so after your dad dies. Yeah. You move back here. Yep. And do you move like in with her family or? Yeah. So we moved in with my great grandmother, who you know, was pretty old at the time even then. We didn't live with her for very long. We lived with her for a few months. Okay. Maybe a couple of months until my mom found an old boyfriend that she moved in with and lived with him for a while. And then that was only for a couple of months until she found an apartment and above my grandmother, actually. My grandmother, so we lived with my great-grandmother. Her daughter, my grandmother, had a place that was a duplex, and the apartment cleared out above, so she had my mom live up there. Okay, and your mom is or is not an Adventist at this time? Not yet. So she is starting to come back to God. So she had gone to the Adventist church, but never converted to Adventism. Okay, she just heard the prophecy stuff and whet her appetite. Or... Yeah, you got it. So she's not a dyed-in-the-wool Adventist at this point by any means. Right. So she kind of goes to church there or whatever. I don't even think that she was ever a member. Okay. Then we come here, and once she settles in and starts, you know, maybe the whole between her ex-boyfriend that she was living with, and it wasn't like a relationship. It was just a place to crash, you know. But between him and my great-grandmother, you know, that was probably only a few months. And then she got her place above my grandmother. All right. And ironically, a Daniel and Revelation seminar comes to town at the local Adventist church, and she says, she gets a postcard or whatever. She says, that's
That's perfect.
The mailings really do work.
Yeah, that's where we'll go. So, yeah, prove that mailings can be worth the money, apparently. They too can ruin a life. So we ended up going to the Brooklyn Seventh-day Adventist Church from that mailing, and that was where she met the guy that she's currently married to.
Okay.
So she met him there. About 10 weeks later, they got married, and that was when it really started. So she had been going to the Adventist church, but she wasn't. It was just a church. It might as well have been a Presbyterian or a Baptist or a Methodist church. Mm-hmm. For her, it was just.
But after they get married, now it's real.
Right, because he's like the full bore Adventist, right? So So they get married, and he had been a really nice guy up to that point for the couple of months.
For those 10 weeks, yeah.
Very gregarious, funny, fun to be around, that sort of thing. I don't think he knew what he was getting into. My sister and I were like a pack of wolves. I mean, we raised each other. We were nuts. So we were not well behaved. We were not, we fought literally constantly. And we're in the middle. I mean, our dad just died. There's a lawsuit as part of it. So lawyers are calling, and we're trying to sort through all that and the emotions. So he just could not handle it. So he shut down. A period of 7 years passed before he actually spoke again.
All right. You just said a period of 7 years passed before you spoke again.
Yeah, before he did.
What do you mean by that?
So, in fairness, he spoke, just not to my sister and I. I think and I don't know, he's never said this, but I think he kind of developed in his own mind a thought that he just waited out. Like, eventually, if he hid out in his room, these kids are going to get old enough that they're going to leave, and then he'll be okay. So he spoke a little. I mean, I could probably, in all honesty, I mean, in total fairness, I could probably write on one sheet of paper everything he said to us in 7 years.
It would be just like a good morning or a hey.
Oh, no. There was no good mornings. If I said good morning to him, it would be dead silence. It would all be stop yelling at your mother. Go to your room, that sort of thing.
Did you ever get into fisticuffs with him?
No, he's badass. He's got like 25, 30 years of martial arts experience. I was terrified of him.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that was sufficient enough to dissuade any anger being taken out on him. The guy's,
All right, so you move back to Cleveland. They get married. You're how old at that point in time, roughly?
Let's say 10.
10.
10, maybe 11.
And you're how old right now?
39.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it was.
And they're still married.
They are. They are.
And when I see them, it seems like a pretty happy marriage.
I think that it is.
Yeah.
And at this point, I've gotten over my issues by and large with him, and we talk,
yeah.
and it's okay. Or we're not best friends by any stretch of the imagination, but
right.
I'm doing more damage to me and my family if I hold on to any grudges or any ill will. So there's no.
Yeah.
And listen, I may have told you this at some point before, but I'm a big believer that people can impact you and teach you in more than one way. Mm-hmm. And he was the man who taught me really how to be a father. And it was by observing him and doing the exact opposite. I mean, mine having grown up with this guy, mm-hmm. The way he handled us. I mean, like, it was heartless, God. I mean, I remember a day that when, this is shortly, 6 months after they got married, maybe. And it'd been a few months that he'd been in this, I'm not talking to anybody stage. And I'm thinking, I've got to do something to fix this. Mm-hmm. There's got to be something I can do to fix it. Mm-hmm. So I remember walking into their bedroom. He was reading an Ellen White book. And I remember coming to him and knocking on the door, saying, can I come in? He didn't say anything, so I came in. And I said, my dad is gone, and you're married to my mom, And I just wondered if maybe it would be okay if I called you Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't look up from his book, didn't say anything. And I said, well, does that mean yes? Does that mean no? Didn't say anything. So I just left, and that was, he literally had made the decision that we didn't exist. That's how he rolled for a long time. So, that's an example of the type of guy that he was. So in observing that, largely I grew up without a dad, obviously. Because even though he was that, it could have been a lot worse. There's people who grew up with parents who sexually abuse them, who beat them, obviously there's emotional issues there, but, he would never hurt us. And he never even looked like he wanted to hurt us, kind of a thing. So still though, a lot of the observation of him taught me this is not the kind of person I want to be. This is not the kind of man I want to be. I learned, he didn't really ever work. He let my mom take care of him. So it was really it was a very educational, formative relationship in learning this is who I don't want to be.
Right.
And I don't say that tongue in cheek. I mean that wholeheartedly. I put a lot of thought into what kind of a person do I want to be, and being the exact opposite of the way he was. I feel like I'm a really hardworking individual because I saw what the impact of him not being was on our family. It's really important to me to emotionally connect with my kids because I saw what the impact and felt what the impact was of not having that. So in many ways, ironically enough, he was one of the most important people in my life.
Oh, I was thinking about you this morning, and there's a couple men in my life that do this, and you're definitely one of them. You shame me as a father. No, I'm being very, very serious. Like you're so good with your kids, and I have the utmost respect for you. If you could raise mine, I'd really appreciate it. But you're an excellent dad, and I would fight anybody who said anything different, unless they were bigger than me. Then I would just say mean things to them. But my hat's off to you, dude, because
Thanks.
yeah.
Appreciate that.
You're one of my favorite people, Adam. That's just all there is to
Thanks,
it.
bro.
Yeah. So there's part one of my interview with Adam. It's pretty powerful. You may have a couple of tears in your eyes, but that's all right. This is what this podcast is really all about, is hearing people's stories and trying to get to know them better, and in turn, maybe view people that we don't know with a little bit more grace. So, have a good week.